Well, all right. Well, thank you everyone so much. Quentin is doing, are you doing your training on the wizard now, Quentin?
Yeah, I'll do just a brief training on what that is. And so I think what I'm going to focus on is just how you should use it as the same person maybe who did the PDF field labeling. Does that make sense? Okay. All right.
Or Quentin, I
Yeah,
think actually the
Can
way
I
it's
just,
more naturally going to happen is the person who did the QA.
Okay.
you guys were gonna, this is recorded too, right? This training?
Yes.
Okay, bye. Talk to you later.
All right. So we keep trying to refine this and basically save more and more time for the person who does the doc assemble tweaking and refining. But this is what we have right now. I'm going to take, just as a sample, this verified complaint that we were just talking about. I do want to go in and change those names at some point, but we'll be able to see how this works now. I'm going to add this link here to a card at the top of the Trello list, so you'll be able to get to it that way. So what you'll do, just to be clear, because I guess I glossed over that step, is you'll just take your PDF that you've downloaded, upload it to that form that I was just on. Now it's going to give you kind of a default for the title of the form. So I guess I would call this verified complaint housing TRO, perhaps. That's the name that someone will see when they, it'll go on the top of their browser window, like right here where it says document assembly wizard, and up there. And it will also be the title that's displayed when they're trying to find this form to fill it out in that big interview that we showed a wireframe of on our first call. This name here is going to be kind of just a shorter version of the same thing. It'll be shown on a smartphone screen. And then I would write something that is more natural. Fill out this verified complaint if you have an emergency housing need. Now, this particular form mostly can be filled out in housing court, district court. Technically, it could be filled out in the Superior Court, so I'll go ahead and check that one too. That information should be on the card. I don't think it is generally, but it is something that we asked people to send us when we submitted the form on our PDF upload form. So I'm not sure the best way to get that to people if it's not already on there, but maybe that's a task that someone could take on, is copying that onto each of the cards so we know what courts it's allowed to go into. And this particular form, the preferred court is the housing court. That's a housing form, so I'm going to check that box. This name here isn't really crucial. It doesn't hurt to keep it the same as the name of the PDF, but of course we're going to take out this part where we've named it first quality check ready for upload. And it's nice to have a link to the form where you could download it later. So let's see if we have that. And I don't know if we did for sure. But for now, I'll just type in. The idea here is this should be a link for someone who's filling out who's running our interview to be able to see what was the original form that I'm filling out. So it gives them context and so they have a better idea, because we know that this is going to be a first rough draft. There may be things that need to be improved. We want to make sure that somebody can understand what they're filling out without relying on what we've put in. So it's like basically a double check that they're doing the right thing. I do want to show you here, we have some categories that we've pre-selected. If you happen to notice that this should really go in some other category, you can add more categories. This is probably where you're going to spend the most time on this first screen here. So I tried to give you some context for what we're doing. The first question for each variable is, what do you want the label of the question to be? And that label is the same as what appears here on the left in this example. That's the same thing. This is a label. So what would we want the question prompt to be for that one field? So it might be something like name of tenant. Then you have some choices below. to let you say what type of input this field uses. And you have three choices. You can either have a yes, no, which is a checkbox. You can have a text, which is one single line like this one right here. Or you can have an area, which is basically a larger area you can type in. And the default is going to be 3 lines, but someone could go back in later and refine it and add more lines if they needed to. This can be a text field. This does a pretty good job of guessing what type of field it is going to be. It doesn't know the difference between an area and a text field. Sometimes your text is going to be an input field like this, but really you also want to do some other special formatting with it, like numbers and integers will let you use an up and down button to get to the next number, which is kind of handy. Currency will put a $ next to it automatically. Date will automatically format it as a date, and email will validate it to make sure that it's actually a valid email. Those are kind of more optional refinement things. So if you don't catch that on your first pass, it's something we can definitely add when we're trying to refine and improve the interview later. The main thing is just, this is your chance to go in and make sure that the names, the labels make sense. We start with using just the name of the variable and take out the underscores and turn them into spaces, which is probably pretty good for most use cases. But we might want something different, like name of defendant. So that's your process, is just to go through, give all of the fields meaningful labels so people can understand what they're filling in. I won't do this for all of them. I will say, I think a little further down, we have a date. So here, it's automatically selected it's a date because that was given as part of the name of the variable. So good job there. This is a checkbox. So it's automatically, it knows it's a checkbox. Here we go. This is a description. So this might be something that you'd want to change. We probably want to make it an area so there's more room to type a more complete description. They probably have on the form a few lines for us to fill that information in. I'm just going to go ahead. So once you've gone through all of the labels, so here this tells me there's a couple of fields that weren't labeled yet. They might not be important. They might have been added accidentally, and that might be why the person just didn't notice that they don't have a label, or maybe a glitch.
I haven't
figure out.
Quinn, this is Tyler. I have a note about that once we finish with the demo.
Oh, okay.
I know why that label is coming through, and I'll address that afterwards.
Okay. But this is a good quality check too for anybody who's doing this. So this is a way that you can take, someone who's doing the quality check could use this process to kind of see that the names look correct. And one thing you may or may not notice, I can't remember how many of the fields we had that were from that built-in list. On this interview screen, we're not going to ask you about those fields at all because we've already written questions for those. This is just about helping write questions for the fields that are unique to this form. Then you get a chance to create your questions one at a time. You can have more than one field on each screen of the interview, just like we have here. So we're going to give this screen a good label. That's the title that comes up right here. Like this title of this interview is create a draft of the first question. So I would say something like maybe name of the parties. Write the full name of each party. This is not the best plain language instruction, by the way, but this is just a draft. I do have this little toggle you can use here, which says, is there at least one question on this screen that's required? So the reason for that is you might have a prompt to the user that just says, is there anything else you want to say? And just have one big text area on a screen, right? You can imagine that that's a good question to have in some interviews if they have room for like a big optional block of text that you can write. And then we just handle that a little bit differently if that's the case. So if you can remember, if you think it's that type of question, to just change it to no. But that may not come up in a lot of your forms. So on this screen, I have the heading as name of the parties. So I'm just going to go ahead and select all the questions that are about the person's name. And then I just scroll down and I click continue. Now the next one, I'm going to say contact information. I'm not going to change the placeholder text because it doesn't really need a sub question that explains it. It's kind of self-explanatory what we're doing. And you do need to put something here, so you can just leave placeholder text and the person who's at the next step can clean that up. Okay, so that's all of the contact questions that we had. Oh, nope, we had a few more. In general, these should be in the order that they are, that you see them inside your PDF editor. Which is this should be the same as the order they are on the screen. But it's not the end of the world if they're not quite that order. The benefit of that is that you shouldn't have to do a lot of scrolling on this list. Okay. Let's just say, why do you need the TRO? Please describe the incidents that occurred. So I'm going to just check all these questions that are about incidents. So good naming here, that keeps them easy to group. Tell us how this affected you. And for draft language, you probably have something that's in the PDF that you can just copy and paste here. We don't have a way to extract that, but you can have this open and the PDF on the side and just be copying and pasting and comparing to make sure that you know what should go where. And let's see. We're going to have to deal with some of these later. So like the signatures we don't want to use, they're not actually text fields at all. The verification is not really that either, but we didn't have a way to deal with those in our wizard. So I might just say like to do for next step and just put all these fields there. That's always okay. We're just trying to capture all the fields right now. That's the main thing we're doing, and saving some time for the person who does the next step. So you get this, which is the actual content of a DocAssemble interview. That's a draft. So you can see like right away, like that process we just did saves you having to type all this stuff, which is the other alternative you'd have. You can click download, and this file, I should see if I can prompt that so it doesn't open in a new tab, that it always opens in a new window. But basically you're just going to save that and then upload it to the Trello card. And let me see, why is it not letting me do that?
And as someone who developed, this is Matt, as someone who develops in DocAssemble but isn't nearly as good at it as Quentin, like it would save someone like me even more time. Like the amount of time that this saves and the speed at which this will let us get things up there, I think it's hard to overstate.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that's true. Yeah. So I would then just take that and upload it here. Let me show you what that does. So with our interview. So basically what we did, created a questionnaire for the person, which should be a pretty good draft. So there's a little bit more tweaking we have to do. Like we're still working on refining those questions that are the same on all the interviews. So I just have those built in here, but in the next step, we're gonna make this something you don't have to do manually. So, and we're gonna keep refining those questions as well. So I'm just gonna copy and paste that into our interview. Let's see how good of a job this did. Okay, so there's some things that aren't filled in yet. So let's see. We'll be able to have, there's a few things we're gonna be able to do to make that better anyway. I'm just gonna make that a default. Okay, we didn't have a question for court name yet either. not quite yet. So that's an area of this part of the questionnaire that we're still working on. And docket number is another one. Okay.
Quentin, I think DocAssemble's undefined names is helping you on the right over there too.
Oh, yeah. Good,
Yeah.
good call.
As someone who ends up with a lot of undefined names in their interviews.
Yeah. And we can also put in something new, which is like kind of a catch-all block. So if someone makes a mistake, it won't show an error to the end user, which is really nice. And one more thing here, right? So this is what we got from just doing that process. We had to do a little bit of tweaking and cleaning up. That will be a lot less over time. Okay, so something that you might do if you're the DocAssemble editor is you would clean these up, right? So you'd want to have these in a more logical order. We didn't even give you that option or control there. There's no real reason to. I'm just going to put in some dummy values here. And these we get the date picker for, get these as checkboxes. This is that nice longer text field that we had. We didn't do that for this one, but we could have. And something you could do is make it so that these fields show and hide. So here we have, did incident other happen? And then there's the description. That probably is, that's the UI we have on the PDF, but we can do better stuff in this form. And these are just the catch-alls that we had that we didn't really know what to deal with yet. Okay. Obviously, what you want to have is not an error at the end, so we'll have to see why that is. I'm thinking that probably it's because the name doesn't actually match the form that we have uploaded. So, but either way, you see we got really far with just that process. We're going to keep making it better, but people at the next step are going to have the DocAssemble experience, hopefully, to be able to do that. And just thinking about how to group the questions is a huge thing for us, and having some placeholder text there that makes sense.
And also, I think, so you all don't get the wrong idea, for those of you who haven't done software development, this process, clicking a button and seeing an error screen, that's the ball game. So like, again, getting this far with it is really huge.
Yeah. And I'll have to figure out why that is. I think it might be something with how long the file name is or something. We'll have to figure that out. Maybe the fact that it has dashes in it might be the problem. That's something that we can troubleshoot and have some quality control checks that would fix those problems before they would happen again. Any questions about that?
No, this is awesome. Thank you, Quentin.
Those 4 screens that we went through, by the way, that's the main thing that we're asking people to do right away. And the DocAssemble thing is definitely iterative, and people will be having to work on that for sure to get everything right. So one thing that I will say is, like, we kind of set a placeholder here so that people can do some logic to show and hide different screens in different contexts. So that's something that should be easy for people to do over time. Just for example, like there's a whole section of questions that you might not even have to see if on some forms, if depending on an earlier answer you gave. Yeah. Well, I'm not hearing questions, so maybe this is a good time to end. But if any, yeah.
I just wanted to follow up on the item from that first. When you initially uploaded the document, there was that Form 15 field. And I think this is something that is potentially relevant to the quality control check. That's coming from the footer of the PDF. It's not actually a field in the PDF. And when Adobe opens up and reads the form, it thinks it's a field because there's a line there in the footer.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I initially went through and did the verified complaint form, I removed that out, but I think it might have automatically reappeared when someone opened it up again to do the quality check. So it's just something to keep track of as we go through the process.
Do you think it's important that we have that number? I mean, it's obviously the form reference number. Do you think it's important that we have that, or can we in Acrobat Pro just actually delete that piece of the form? I mean, if it's going to be causing that issue.
Two things we can do. One, we can definitely delete it in the form verification and quality control step. We don't. It sounds like Tyler did do that, and maybe just got added in accidentally at the quality control step. And second, those are things we can catch once we get it into the DocAssemble stage. Like if that question doesn't make sense, we can just delete that question later. But both are correct.
We bring to people's attention there that that's something that might come up.
Good idea.
One final question that came up during your demo. For the date fields, it's asking for a day. In some of the forms that I've been going through, I've noticed that it asks for a year, but it assumes that you're in, it assumes the first 2 digits of the year. So it puts 20 and then a blank for the last 2 digits of the year. How do we deal with that?
I think that's it's a refinement step. So we'll give this to do the draft. If it turns out it doesn't make sense to ask for it as a date at all, we can change that question type. So it's just what are the last 2 digits of the year? I think there we do want to ask for the full year and then do some back end processing to turn it into the 2 digits. Very flexible platform we're on with DocAssemble. We're kind of setting up a rigid workflow to make it easy to automate and get a first draft. But we can definitely go back in and clean those things up later. So just use the best name that you can think of on the PDF. It won't really constrain us or limit us for what kind of questions we can ask. We can always make them better later.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay,
all right.
Great. Well, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I feel like we're probably ready to start using this, but I think there's probably more to do at the other stages too, so that would be okay.
And I think also, like, if folks aren't waiting on subject matter expert stuff, like, there's no reason to not just try your best to get through the end, right? Because I think we're going to learn a lot as we work with these actual interview files. So if you're waiting for subject matter expert input, great, sit tight. If not, like, don't worry about getting it perfect. That's not the point at all.
One of the issues that I had was something that I've kind of sorted out with Kate now. But I was saying that maybe I can just add a little comment on the actual Trello card about what arose, so that it kind of tracks through the process what is happening, and issues that I've become aware of with the form, or discussions that I've had with subject matter experts. Just very briefly, 2 or 3 lines, just put that in on the card. So that maybe the quality check, they're aware of that, and the next, as it goes through the assembly line.
Yeah. So are you saying, like, actually just get the interview text printed out and then address that stuff later on in the process potentially?
Yeah, to some extent, but also just to have almost a history of what's happening, and also just so that we're not reinventing the wheel every time a new person looks at the form. Oh, there you are. Yeah. So that we're not reinventing the wheel every time someone looks at the form. It's something that they can see straight away. It's an issue that we've dealt with. I've dealt with subject matter experts on it already. Just keep adding to the Trello cards.
Yeah, I think to the extent that people can document their process in the Trello cards, it's going to be super helpful. So please do that, and thank you for bringing it up.
That's a great idea. All right, I think we probably should end the meeting. I think we've ran it, but people can keep the conversation going on Slack and on Trello cards, whatever makes the most sense.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Great.